Hello again, friends, and welcome back to another edition of Ron Fuller's Studcast. I'm the great Brian Last, and it's my pleasure to be with you once again as the Tennessee Stud tells us his tales and shares wrestling history with us, right now focusing in on the beginning of 1975 in Knoxville in his southeastern wrestling territory. But without any further ado, the man of the hour, the host of the Studcast, the Tennessee Stud himself, Ron Fuller. Ron, how are you today?
I am great, Brian. Just doing wonderfully, my man. You know, Smoky Mountains are beautiful today. Got the old horse saddled up and, really looking forward to a good ride today.
Well, that's good. I guess a bad ride would really ruin your day.
Yeah, you don't want a bad ride. The weather's nice, so we don't have to worry about that part of it. That's for sure.
I'll tell you what, before we get going with the rest of the Studcast, speaking of good rides, I guess this is a nice transition here. I want to mention once again, because the reaction's been overwhelming, Super Studcast number 16 with Les Thatcher has really done just incredible in terms of the reaction it's received, the amount of people who have downloaded it, and we're very, very appreciative of that. It was one of the most fun recordings we've ever had, and part 2 is available now. As this show comes out, it is available right now at tnstud.com or patreon.com/Studcast. We'll have more about this later in the show. But Ron, let's return to things. I guess we are in February, into March of 1975, correct?
Yeah, we're basically starting around the early part of March 1975. We're going to talk just a little bit about the February 28th card, but we're pretty much we're going to get the results of the February 28th card at the early on in the match here. I mean, on the match, we're going to have a match here for sure, and we're going to. Before we get into that, though, I would like to go into something that's, it's a very touchy subject in a way for me, because the guy was a great friend of mine. But, before we get through February of 1975, there's something that happens in February of 1975 that just, it ruins the month for a lot of people. And it certainly was a bad deal for me, because one of my really good friends and one of the great workers of all time is in the plane wreck on February 20th, 1975. Bobby Shane died in a plane crash with Dennis McCord, who's later going to become known as Austin Idol, Gary Hart, and the pilot of the plane is Buddy Colt. And for fans that may have missed the earlier Studcast, number 57, I think, and I'm pretty sure that is the number. The name of that is called, the title of that is Bobby Shane, and Bobby Shane Tribute. And everything is there that pertains to the loss of one of the best workers of all time. And if you haven't heard this episode, it really describes the plane crash in detail and a significant amount of other information about the great Bobby Shane, and one of the great young stars in the sport, just really is getting off the ground. And what a terrible, terrible deal on the night of February 20th, 1975 in Tampa Bay. I remember doing that program, Brian, with you, and geez, that's a tough subject to even talk about. But 75 is not a good year for private plane crashes, as a matter of fact, and there's going to be another one in the summertime.
That's right, but as it pertains to this one, and I know we're going to get right back on the timeline and go into March in a second, but February 20th, so it's the day before you running a show. Obviously, you wouldn't have heard right away. It wasn't like there was social media or anything. You would have had to receive the phone call at some point. Do you remember where you were when you did hear about this plane crash?
No, I don't. I really don't remember. But I remember I didn't take the news very well. I mean, at that point in time, I don't think there had been a lot of plane crashes in which wrestlers were involved in. And this one, I happen to know all four of those guys very well. And Austin Idol, Dennis McCord, his real name, and I had known even before I started wrestling in Florida in 1970. And he's on this plane. He's going to get hurt. Everybody on this plane is going to get hurt, as a matter of fact. And Bobby Shane's actually going to go down with the plane, and just a horrible, horrible thing. I don't remember where I was, And I don't even remember who called me, but I remember it really shook me up because my relationship with Bobby was so good. And I was hoping, if I ever got my own territory, he would have been one of my first choices as talent to bring in there because he was young like I was and just a phenomenal talent in the ring.
He was about to be the booker for Florida for Eddie Graham. And of course, you were the booker for yourself in Knoxville. What did you do on the 28th, February 28th, 1975? You were still in Chilhowie Park.
Yep, we're still there in Chilhowie Park. And, later on we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about today, Brian, is I want to cover a whole lot of ground again today. I want to talk about that card. To give you the final results, the fans of the February 28, 1975 card. I want to talk about other places I'm working in March. I want to talk about the continued rumblings between Hodge and Dale Lewis concerning this $1,000 challenge with the fans from the audience. I'm going to add more matches. I'm going to add another match to that Sunday Coliseum card in March 23rd, 1975, the first time ever a Sunday event in the Coliseum. Only my second event in the Coliseum so far at this point, and it's at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody's ever tried that. So we're really trying some things to see if we can get established in that Coliseum. We're going to describe a fantastic feat of strength today with Danny Hodge. Truly remarkable, man, what his grip was all about. We're going to talk a little bit about the inevitable feat of the inevitable turnover of talent in every single territory in the country. And we're going to now experience one of the first small turnovers of talent pretty soon here in Southeastern. There's a lot of history in this one, man, and the type of wrestling conversation you're only probably going to hear on a Studcast, because at this point I'm the only wrestler, booker, and owner that is handling all three of these major responsibilities during this same time frame. So I got a lot on my plate, and I'm the Southern Heavyweight Champion. And so I really believe that I think these history lessons that we give here on Studcast and then Super Studcast are maybe has something to do with all the loyal fans we have and our rapidly growing audience. But I really like to talk about the history, and I don't know anybody that's got much more of it in their veins than I do and my family does.
Well, speaking of history, we're going to get to the show February 28th, 1975 in Chilhowie Park. The name of the building was the Jacobs Building, correct?
That's correct. There's two facilities in that park. One is an indoor arena called the Jacobs Building, and the other is an amphitheater that's outside that will hold about 5,000 people. It's a pretty good venue to be in there, but then you have to worry about the rain in the summertime. So, sometimes you get rained out. You may have that problem and you lose an entire event, lose an entire night. But yeah, this particular card on February 28, 1975 is in that Jacobs Building. And this one is going to be about the fifth week in a row that we've filled her up. But we're really starting to do better. First match on that card, let's just go into that. First match on the card is Devoy Brunson against Joe Costello. It's a draw. And these opening matches they're hard for me to fill at this point in time with great talent, because my territories, it's just not far enough along to have great talent from the top of the card all the way to the bottom of the card. That's what's going to happen in Southeastern wrestling. It's not just going to be there, but when we take it to Florida, it'll be the case there. Continental, I try to load up my crews with the very best talent I possibly can. And we're going to be able to start doing that at Southeastern and Knoxville. And probably within the next year, it's going to really start to happen to where we're going to get that top to bottom type of evening for fans, which is really what I want. And so the Devoy Brunson and Joe Costello have a draw match. I think it's probably just a 15-minute time limit. But there's a whole lot of companies that never reach the point to where they've got talent from top to bottom, that they can provide that opening match is just as good sometimes as the main event. And that's what I'm shooting for, and that's what's going to happen eventually with Southeastern.
Do you think Devoy Brunson ever thought if I just hang around long enough, I'll get a big push? Or was he in on it? Was he in on the fact that he did not have a future with what you were trying to turn the company into?
No, there was a lot of young guys here. And Joe Costello, both these guys here are a good example of guys that everybody gets involved in wrestling and they want to become a star. They want to become the top guy. They want to work the main event. Some guys are just never going to get there. They just don't have what it takes to make that happen. And DeVoy Brunson's kind of one of those guys. I think maybe at this point, he really doesn't know where this company's headed. We're brand new. He's seen John Kazana run this town. He's beginning to be on some of these cars. He's seeing bigger crowds than what Kazana was doing. He's seeing the growth, but he has no idea how far he's going to be able to go. And he has no idea the tremendous amount of talent that's going to be. I don't either at this point, to be quite honest with you. I don't know where my company is headed. I'm just doing the best I can to find the best guys I can get to come in and work for me. On this first opening match that night, I'm not really excited about it, but it's what I have to do because I'm still in the building process. Second match on the card is a better match, obviously. It's Professor Dale Lewis versus George Strickland. George Strickland's a fairly good talent. He's a veteran guy, been around for a while. But, he's no match for Dale Lewis. And obviously, probably 12, 14 minutes, somewhere in that range, Lewis will get George Strickland. And then after beating Strickland, Dale's going to do his normal thing. He's going to invite the challengers to come up again, and he'll get 3 more challengers. He'll take 3 more guys after George Strickland, and he will shoot with them. And obviously, nobody's going to win that $1,000 bill. Because that's just not going to happen. And that's a very safe bet. You got a guy like Dale Lewis. You can put just about anybody in the ring with him, unless it's somebody that wanted to try to sucker punch him or do something that he wasn't expecting. I would never expect Dale Lewis to lose any of these matches against challengers out of a crowd.
When he's doing those matches, specifically in Knoxville, where are you? Are you watching it or are you doing other things? I mean, is this the kind of thing just because it is interacting physically with the audience that you are watching, or where are you?
I'm watching these. I want to watch them. I want to see how Dale handles it, for one thing. I also want to see the reaction of the fans. I don't watch the match as much as I watch the fans, because you learn so much by seeing people's expressions and how they are. You can pretty much tell whether they're into it or whether they're not into it. And these matches are they're usually short, somewhere between 5, 7.5, hardly ever gets to 10 minutes. And Dale just rolls them around eventually, gets on top of them, rides them, blows them up, and then he normally pins them. He doesn't even use submission holds to beat them most of the time. He'll just get them into a position where he just pins them, holds them on the mat, and the referee counts them out. But I watch them. I really am interested in how this all plays out and what's going on that's making this out to be what I envisioned it as being when I put that $1,000 bill on his lapel the first day he was there. And I'm getting it in just about every one of these matches on every night.
How much of the shows are you watching? For instance, let's talk about the next match, Ron. Les Thatcher versus Danny Hodge. Sounds like it would be a really good wrestling match. Are you watching this? And in general, how many of the matches are you watching a night?
It depends on the card. On a night like this, I'm going to watch a little bit of Thatcher and Hodge because I kind of want to see how Les does against Hodge, and I don't know that Les has worked against Hodge very many times. And this is going to be a different type of night for Les, and so I would watch a little bit of this one. Like I did, I always watch Dale's matches, more so not his matches with the regular boys, the professionals, but his matches with those people from out of the crowd, because I was very concerned about how those matches went and if it was accomplishing what I wanted done. There's another match coming up here with Jimmy Golden. and it's Jimmy's first night. So I'm going to watch a little bit of that, but I'm just going to watch the early parts of that just to see how he is accepted by the audience. Because I'm planning on keeping Jimmy for a long, long time, because I think he's one of those type of guys that you can turn heel, you can turn babyface. He can do whatever it is that you want to get done, and he can do a fantastic job of it as well. So, I watch these matches, especially with Danny and Les's match here. They have a great match, and they do a tremendous amount of wrestling in it. And I noticed, for one of the things I'm out there to watch for, I noticed that the match is very much enjoyed by the fans. And I watched the match, and I was pleased to see the great reaction of the fans to lots of wrestling, because now that's what I'm trying to sell them, and they're beginning to buy it. I'm amazed at how much their attitudes and how much their perception of what the sport's all about has changed over a short period of time. And about the last 6 weeks, I start to see a change in the crowd and the way they react to wrestling. My strategy of Lewis offering a $1,000 bill from challengers in the crowd to the challengers in the crowd, that provides me some shoots on every card. Fans are going to see actual shoots. And there's a steady diet of Hodge matches. He's there a lot. Jack Briscoe's been there the last 6 weeks. Lou Thez has been there in the last 6 weeks. And there's many other shooter-type workers that's beginning to bring about changes I was looking for. They are producing what I wanted to produce from the beginning, is wrestling fans, and build my business around wrestling, and not just the blood and guts that had kind of always been the story before I came.
This match, Ron, of course, ends in a draw. And from there, we go to, like you said before, the debut of your cousin, Jimmy Golden. Before we get to the match, I want you to talk about it, but you said you want him to stay there a long time. Does he know that? Is he prepared to stay there a long time, or does he think he's just coming in for a cup of coffee?
No, I think when we talk about it, he asked me all the questions that an experienced worker would ask you. What do you got for me? How you plan to use me? How long you want to be there? When can I come back if I leave? That type of, all those questions that are pertinent to their future there. And Jimmy asked those same questions. I know Jimmy's skills because I have worked with him some in Florida up at this point. From 1970 to 74, when I started out in Florida, Jimmy spent a lot of time down there. And he's good then. I see it in him. And so I not only talked to him about coming and wrestling for me, I talked to him about moving. And when he says, yeah, I'll make that commitment, then that's all I needed to hear. I'm at that point, if he's willing to move there, I'm willing to hang on to him and to make it worth his while to make that move. Now, he's not probably going to buy a house. He's a pretty young guy at this point. He's going to get himself an apartment somewhere. And if you have to move him, it's not a critical thing for him where he's got property and all that. He's just one of the wrestlers. And yeah, I'll give up my apartment and I'll find me another place to work. But I really want to keep Jimmy because I just feel like he's going to be a critical part of my building the company. And it turns out to be the case. Now, in this match, this particular night, he's teaming up with the Club-Footed Inferno. Rocky Smith, great worker. And they're wrestling against Ken Mantell and John Foley for the Tennessee titles tag match. And Jimmy Speedy moves in the ring, man. Give him a great start on his first night, And Jimmy, I always liked the way he was so smooth and fast. And that night, he really starts the match off good. I think he starts off within 1 minute, he catches somebody with a drop kick that just ignites the crowd. It's like, wow, they hadn't seen anything like that. And I realized right then that, wow, man, the kid's got it, and he's gonna really be a monster for me there. And he does turn out to be really a great talent for me.
Do you think at all at the time, if I get Jimmy here, Robert's absolutely going to want to come here?
I'm thinking it, Yeah, I'm thinking it, but I don't say it to Jimmy. I don't tell Jimmy.
Of course.
But, and Jimmy's smart, he knows that, hey, you get me in there, and I start to get over and, hey, Rob will come, and So Rob and Jimmy have a real close-knit future ahead of them as tag teams. They wrestled everywhere, even long into the 90s as tag team partners with all types of different companies. So, they are going to become a bona fide, fantastic team. And, Jimmy's got to know that, I'm looking at Rob. I want to get Rob in there, too. I like, obviously, having my family members close. That's a good thing. And it's a beautiful part of the country, and I know they're going to enjoy themselves there. And they do. It works out to be great for both of them.
I've never asked you this before, but it got me thinking talking about Jimmy here, because I know it's not him. But with you having such a large wrestling family, is there like one member of the family, you don't have to name names, but is there like one member of the family that you're like, oh no, like every time he calls, he wants to be booked?
George Goulas. You're talking about a George Goulas type.
Well, I guess so.
Yeah, no, I don't believe so. When I think back on my family and even Lester's sons, Jackie and Roy Lee, are good wrestlers. They have the real skills, and they know how to sell. They know how to work. They're good in the ring. I never dealt with the Fields boys' sons very much. Ricky Fields, Lee Fields' son, wrestled for me some when I first went to the Southeastern down there in Pensacola in 1978. Great worker, good worker.
He was already an established star there when you bought the territory.
Yeah. And he was a good worker, small, and I think that hurt that part of the family. They weren't as big. Jimmy's about 6'3", Rob's about 6'4", I'm at 6'9". There's some height there in the three of us, and they happen to be a little bit smaller guys. But I don't think there were very many guys in the Welch family that couldn't work. The only one maybe that was questionable was Herb's son. He had a son named Doyle that taught to wrestle, and Doyle had a big, huge cauliflower ear that just exploded one night when it was at its biggest size. Somebody hit him, and it kind of ruined his career. He never became what he probably could have been. And he might have been one of those guys like you're talking about that had he called and wanted in, I might have had to say, well, I'm full or whatever. But, most of the guys in the family were pretty darn good because they had grown up and they had all watched it. And I think that helps. That's very helpful. When you start watching wrestling at 3, 4, 5 years of age and you watch it for 15 years till you get to be 20 years old, you have a pretty good idea of what a good worker looks like and what one that doesn't looks like. And, it's, I think we produced some pretty decent wrestlers in the Welch family over the whole time period.
I think so. And of course, speaking of good workers, the main event here, the Southern Heavyweight Championship, the champion, Ron Wright, versus the former champion, Ron Fuller. Hey, that's you.
Yeah. That's me. And, and what's happened is, the week before, Thez has been the special referee, and he comes in. Obviously, I don't think I'm going to be able to beat Thez and Ron Wright, and that's basically what happens. Ron Wright walks out of there with the belt, and he walks out of there with the secretary, too, and So the title defense, this title defense, it's by the new champion, Ron Wright, and he's defending against me. And it only has one stipulation in it: the winner's going to get the belt, and they're going to get the secretary. So I wanted to get her back, the secretary back, because I was negative. It was negatively affecting my heat. Wright had won the week before because of Thez, but Wright had my secretary for 4 straight weeks. So this match on February 28, 1975, had to put the heat back on me. I had to get my heat back in order to be able to assure that we don't lose momentum and we keep that Friday night going. So that Friday night, Wright wanted to use his chisel on me. That's a funny down deal, right? Imagine that. And I mean, he's like, he has it out and he's sharpening it again. It's one of the old deal, man. It reminds me of sitting in the dressing room in Florida, first time I ever saw him. And he when we talk about the match, he says, Ron, I need to get you with my chisel, Ron. No, I don't think so, Ron. No, we don't need to do it. So, and he wants to use the chisel on him. I don't blame him, So, but I tried to explain to him, by me bleeding at this point, I need to get heat before they start seeing me bleed and before they start beating me. And he's already beat me in the middle last week with Luthez, and now I need to start to get my heat back. So I kind of have to explain it to him, So I explained it to him why he couldn't bust me with his chisel tonight or leave with the belt again. And I the way I talked to him about it is just truthfully and honestly. And if we're going to continue to build the crowds, that's what's got to happen. And some bookers or owners don't take the time to explain to their boys why they cannot or will not do some things for their boys. I never had a problem with it. I always liked working with guys who wanted to know what was happening. What's going to happen in this program, Ron? What's going to happen to me 3 weeks down the road here? What do you got in mind here, I didn't mind guys asking me those kind of questions. There are a lot of bookers and a lot of owners that don't want to hear that. They just want you to blindly follow along and not be curious about where you're headed. But I didn't have a problem talking to guys about that. And I found early on as a booker that talent respects bookers that shoot straight with them. And I like to shoot straight with guys from the very beginning. And they also work harder for you to get angles over. And that's going to keep increasing business. If they're a part of a program and they understand what's going to happen, and they see the big picture and the long run, then they're most of the time satisfied and happy with where you're going with it. So that's kind of the case here tonight with this Ron Wright match. So they Wright understood. He understood it real quickly because he'd been a heel most of his darn career, So he knew very well that a heel with no heat, he's not worth anything to your business. So you got to have heat on your heels. And he understood that, I can't keep the belt here and I can't bust you up tonight and you be bleeding all over everything and I walk out of here with the belt and you're all bloody. And, he understands that's not the way we want to do business. And I wanted to make sure that we were on the same page right away early on in our relationship. So I told him he could bring the chisel with him. I said, hey, you sharpened it up. I said, bring it with you, man. Take it in your tights and bring it on out to the ring. And when we get down to the end of the match here, I'm going to end up with it, and I'm going to bust you with it again, just like I did 8 weeks ago, the first time we wrestled on January 10th, 1975. And he's okay with it. I kind of could see the disappointment in his face, but this was business, and it had to be done right. I wanted to bring us back the following Friday in the boxing match. So it's got to be some heat on me to be able to bring a boxing match, to introduce a boxing match and to promote a boxing match at a wrestling event is pretty hard to get people in the seats. So we have to work this match so that it builds toward this boxing match on the next Friday night.
How did you set up the boxing match?
Well, we spent a lot of time, I talked to him and, I say, Ron, we're going to do a boxing match next week. Let's show that we have a little boxing talent. Well, Ron actually was a boxer, and he had more boxing talent than I thought he had. He's a little awkward looking in his movements, but he's a pretty good boxer. I never spent a lot of time boxing, but I felt fairly comfortable in boxing matches. I had not been in a boxing match since my ear got cauliflowered by Dick Murdoch in West Palm Beach in 1971 or 2 or whatever year that was. And I wasn't really looking forward to that part of it, but there's no way my ear is going to get cauliflowered again, so I didn't have to worry about it. So we spent much of the night dancing around the ring and using jabs to Ron Wright's face. I had a long left arm, and I was smacking him in the face, and he was having a hard time getting out of the way and getting away from that. So it was perfect when we got to the point where we wanted to finish the match. He had me going, and when the referee turned his back on him, Ron got out his chisel like he always does, and I happen to be laying on my back in the middle of the ring when this goes down. He gets his chisel, and he's got his back to me. And then the referee sees him with his back turned, and he sees him all bent over there, and he's trying to pull something out. And so the referee runs around in the front of him to confront him to see what he's got. And I'm standing behind. I'm laying on the mat behind Ron Wright, so I just kicked him in the rear end right straight into the referee. The referee went down, Ron Wright went down, and the chisel went down. That was the best part. And I reached over there and got it. And so then I put it on, and I smack him with it. I give him a good shot, man. And down he went, man. And, by the time he gets up, we're ready to start selling into the boxing match at this point. After he went head first and the referee went down, he's face first too. I get the weapon. I'm going to call it the weapon rather than the chisel. I get his weapon and I use it, give him the big blow, and then I put it in my tights. And pretty quickly, he's covered in blood. And I mean covered in blood, I'm talking about from his tip of his forehead to his waist is pretty well blood everywhere. And that's what the chisel was good for. It did a real good job of opening you up. So then it was the time to set up the boxing match for next Friday. So when the referee gets to his feet, Wright staggering around the ring with blood in his face and his eyes, and I'm dancing around and jabbing him with the fast left hands, one after another to the face. I'm trying to look like Muhammad Ali. I'm just bang, 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 bang. He's taking the wild swings. He can't see me good. He's not connecting, and I get another shot. And we're setting this up so that people see that, gosh, man, that might be an interesting boxing match with those two guys. So Wright's, taking the punches. He's taking the real swings at me, but he's not touching me. He hadn't laid a hand on me. So he goes down a couple of times, and about the third time, when he gets up slowly, he takes a wild right-hand swing, and I duck it, and I hit him with a right hand, and down he went for good. I cover him. The referee counts him out, raises my hand, and gives me the belt. I gather up my secretary. I leave the ring with a very angry crowd. I've got my heat back. Now I have taken his chisel that he's famous for busting people with and used it to bust him again, and I've won my belt back, and I've got my secretary leaving with me. I've got all the heat again, and the crowd is they're trying to make it difficult to get to the dressing room like they do every week. And this is just part of the scenario of the sport that I started recognizing really early, that superheat produces sellouts. And that's what we had accomplished in this match. So what happened? I kind of described the match, and I walk out of there with the belt. I've got the secretary. He's all bloody. And so the next day, we film this match. We're starting to film everything I do because I don't wrestle on TV. So this gives me an opportunity and the fans an opportunity to see me in action. And at the same time, I can continue to say I don't wrestle on TV for you freeloaders out here that don't pay any money. I'm not going to wrestle for freeloaders. So it fits in with my thing. Ron Wright's going to watch the match this week. Last week, I watched the match. This time, he's going to watch the match from the night before. And he starts bragging about being a fantastic boxer, and how he had learned to box long before he ever learned to wrestle. And it was so it became, and he draw it on like Ron always does. He just kind of want to quit. I want to just tell you how good I'm on Tennessee dog. He give him the whole deal. And finally, I just go out and interrupt him, same as he did to me the week before when I was watching over a match. And so I come out behind, and my secretary's behind me, and I start bragging about what a display of real boxing skill fans had just witnessed. I'm back there, and I watched it on the screen back there, and I see that, gosh, look at me, I'm fantastic. I start into him then, and bragging about what a boxer I am. So, and then I just carry on with it. I brag about my knuckles are like razors, and my arms are so long I could knock him out from across the street. And given enough time, punching him silly, he's going to need a blood transfusion before they take him to the hospital. not after they get him to the hospital. So he right there on the deal, just challenged. He says, hey, let's just have a boxing match. You think you can do it, and I know I can do it. Let's just have a boxing match. And so we basically have not announced the card. It's early in the program. And he says, let's just me and you box. And I said, okay, fine. And he says, I want to bring my brother, Don Wright, to second me in my corner. And you can have anybody you want. And I said, I'll take Dale Lewis. I'll take Professor Dale Lewis to second me in my corner. And basically, we set up the card for the next Friday night, the main event at that point right there.
Hey, Ron, I did want to ask you something. Obviously, the secretary's back with you now. You mentioned it way back when we first started talking about your introduction into the territory with the secretary, that it was your then wife, and eventually she really didn't care maybe for the role so much. Where was she at this point? Was she happy playing it? Did she enjoy the run with Ron Wright? Did she still want to do it? Where was she at, your secretary at, in terms of wanting to continue this?
Good question. Good question. Actually, she's beginning to draw back a little bit. Heat scares her, and I don't blame her. And the building that we're in, that Jacobs building, is a very dangerous little building, and it's way overcrowded. Too many people in there, and just not a real good situation for her potentially. So she's going to back slowly out of this, and within another few weeks here, we're going to talk about the last one that she does come to, and I think fans will appreciate the fact of why that's the last one that she comes to. That'll be good. So I want to wait on that, but yeah, she's going to slowly back out of this, and by the time she does, I've got the heat. I don't really need that secretary at that point. So it's just it's a great experience for her. And, she never thought that she'd ever be able to do that or have the opportunity to do it. But it's a little bit of a scary thing for a woman, I think, to be involved ringside, and especially after the matches are over when that crowd starts to try to cut your exit off.
It probably would have been a lot easier if her husband was a babyface. It would have been a lot easier, yeah.
Yes, definitely would have.
So back to this show, Ron. I did want to ask you, last time, Dale Lewis and Danny Hodge, there was something going on in the last episode. Where are we at today with that?
Well, it's continuing. In this week, and I just brought that up last week, and Danny's got this opinion that Dale's just not hurting these challengers, and that they need to be in some pain before they leave there. Bloody's even better, and things like that. And I'm not, that's not where I want to go with this. So, and I kind of overhear them again, and they're still discussing, how Danny feels about this, and Dale's got to be somewhat careful here, because there's a big difference between Dale and Danny, and one is a great guy, and the other's a killer. So Dale is very, respectful, I guess is a good word, of Danny. And so, this continuing situation here concerning fan challenges, it's really starting to bother me, though. I don't know exactly where it's headed, but I don't even know. I have no idea where it's going, but it's just starting, and I don't like what I'm hearing. And that's a big concern to me. I'm a young guy, and I'm just starting in my first company, and I certainly don't want to have something go wrong. And that may be something in the future we'll be talking about as well. While we're talking about Danny Hodge, on Saturday TV, I asked Danny if he would do another one of those feats of gripping strength, similar to the one he had done for me before on the show, where he crushed the apple with his bare hand. And he sent me off looking right away for a pair of steel-handled pliers in the back of the television station. So I walk around back there looking and see if I can find something. I finally tracked down one of the employees of the television station, and I asked him, do you have any pliers here, steel handle pliers, And so guy says, sure. He says, I got a brand new set of them here. He goes, you're not going to mess them up, though, are you? And so I took the pliers, I told him no, and I took the pliers because I didn't know what Danny's going to do with the pliers. I'm just looking for whatever he needs. So I take his pliers. I tell him, no, don't mess anything up, So I give the pliers. I take the pliers and I give them to Big Jim Hess. And I say, look, put these on your desk out there because I'm going to send out Danny Hodge, and he's going to do another one of those grip, little grip, exposition, I guess you would call it, just to show how powerful his grip is.
Test the strength.
That's it. Test the strength. So I go back. I give the pliers to Jim. He takes them and puts them on the desk. And about mid-show, I sent Danny out to the desk and told him that I'd found some steel-to-handle pliers and that they were out there. And when Hodge had crushed the apple one hand in front of Hess, Big Jim was not impressed, and I could see it in his face. And that really concerned me because he happened to be on camera, and Danny's squashing this apple with one hand, and the juice is running down his arms, and it's just turning into mush in his hands. It's like a pretty fantastic thing. But Jim Hess, he's got that attitude, and I see that in what he did with the apple, and so I'm a little concerned about what may happen here, especially since I don't know exactly what Danny's going to do. And I should have talked to Big Jim Hess about this, but I was afraid that if I spoke to him about it, he might say something smart to me. And with the way I felt about him, I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to potentially have a problem in which I'm going to lose a commentator before I can fill the spot for sure. So when Hodge arrives at Big Jim at Hess's desk, Hess grabs the pliers and he hands them to Danny, and he says something smart to him like, here, they said you wanted these pliers. And Danny I could see when Danny's expression, he got a little upset with the way Hess handled things. And I felt it from just looking at his face. So he handed the pliers right back to Hess. And he says, you look like a strong guy. Can you break these pliers? And Hess was had. That was the deal. I mean, Danny got him right there, right? And he didn't know what to say. And Danny asked him again. He says, can you break these pliers, Big Jim? And Big Jim looked at him real confused and said, how? And Danny looks at him and says, just squeeze the handles until they break. So Hess now is really in a bad spot. Hodge says, well, go ahead, Big Jim. Just break them. Big Jim's got the pliers in his hand, and Hess looks confused, and he realizes, man, I'm looking bad here, and he goes back to it and he says, how? Again, he says, how a second time. So Hodge just reaches and gets the pliers out of his hands, and he turns toward the camera, and he turns back and looks at him, and he says, here's how you do it, little Jim. He didn't call her Big Jim now. Now you're no longer Big Jim. You're Little Jim. He says, here's how you do it, Little Jim. And he squeezes down on those handles of those pliers so hard that they break off. The handles break off in his hands just above the top of his hand. And Hess jumps back in amazement, and he sells this one good. He has no idea what's going to happen, and he's like, oh, God. And the whole crowd, everybody in the audience was like, oh, my God, did you see that? And I'm back in the control room watching it. I didn't know what he was going to do. I'd never seen him do this. And I was like, oh, my goodness gracious, So, he was not as the guy that loaned them to me is standing behind me. And he's watching the deal too, right? And this is his pliers that I promised him ain't going to get hurt, right? And he goes, what the hell did he just do? And I said, he just cost me a pair of pliers. That's what he did, because I got to buy you some pliers, dude. So now I have to buy the guys a pair of pliers. But it was worth it just to see that expression on Hess's face when Hodge broke those handles out of those steel pliers.
Ron, I know we're talking about February here. We're finishing up February, but fast forward a little bit ahead. We mentioned it last time. You're in the Coliseum once again on Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m., Sunday, March 23rd, 1975. Are you building it up again during this period of time for this week?
Yes. Last week I announced, when we were talking about this card, that I already put a match together. I called my old buddy Bobo Brazil, and I booked him against Crazy Luke Graham. I know we're going to blood and guts match there. It's that's a good one. And so for my next match, I'm going to reach out over the Smoky Mountains to get my match for the next big Coliseum show. I'm going to turn to the Crockett family in Charlotte to get another match. So I'm already friends with Ric Flair from St. Louis, and we've spent a couple of evenings wrestling in the same building and then partying afterward, and that's an evening full of work right there in itself, hanging with Flair. So, I know him, and I want him to come and work for me because I know he's a great worker. So on that Sunday afternoon, thank goodness it is a Sunday, because they couldn't have given him to me on a Friday or a Saturday anywhere because they were using him good. And so it's a Sunday show, and it happens to be in the afternoon. So I'm talking to Crockett Jr. about it, and he says, Ron, I can give you Ric Flair. I said, I'd love to have Flair. And I said, who else can you give me? And he says, well, how about Ken Patera? Well, I knew something about Patera too. And so, gosh, that to me was like, wow, geez, man, that's a winner right there. Flair and Patera on my card for the 23rd. So, yes, I tell him definitely, thank you very much, Jim. And obviously, I never did, what was really strange, I never asked them for any other matches after that point. And they never asked me for any of my talent. But these two cities were close. They're Asheville, North Carolina, sits on one side of the mountains. On the east side, on the western side is Knoxville. They both have televisions, and they overlap. So those fans that were living in the Smoky Mountains, they're going to really love this. They're seeing Flair and Patera and Crockett's talent, and they're also seeing my talent. And I've got two of their key talents on my card. So, it works out very well for me. And this particular show, I'm surprised that I didn't take advantage of it any time after that. But adding that match of card assures me that we're going to have another pretty darn good event here. We got it going already with Bobo and Crazy Luke, and now we got Flair and Patera. And so, I continue on the process. I talked to Jerry Jarrett, and he promises me he'll send me 6 guys for this show. And all those guys are obviously coming from Roy's western side of the territory in Memphis. And so this great card is really beginning to take shape, man. It's looking like and I'm thinking I'm shooting for 8 matches. They've never had 8 matches in the history of Knoxville in one night. I'm trying to piece together an 8-match card. And the only concerns I now have is this 3 o'clock starting time in the afternoon. Is that going to kill me, or is that going to make this a success? But, I always, as a young guy at this point in my life, I always liked a little saying about nothing ventured, nothing gained. And so, I'm going to try the 3 o'clock. I'm going to try the Sunday. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, maybe I will learn something out of the process.
With Patera, Hodge, and Dale Lewis on the same show, you have 3 Olympians working for you at one time. That's pretty impressive. But, Ron, you were worried that 3 p.m. could potentially scare people away. Were you at all worried about raising the ticket prices? Because for the Coliseum, what was normally a $4 ringside ticket is now $5. What was normally a $2.50 general admission is now $3. Ringside went up $1. Everything else went up 50 cents. Any problem there? Do you have any concerns or fears that if you raise the money, the regulars will go, oh, I don't want to go. They're raising the prices.
Well, here's the reason for that. I look at the last 5 shows in Knoxville's Chilhowie Park. All of them are full. I realize that I got to raise my prices at some point here. The prices are very, very low, and it's keeping me from making money that I should be making. So I just look at this Coliseum show. It's a natural fit for a raise in the ticket price. You're going to have 8 matches on that card. You know, I'm looking at the whole process of this big Sunday afternoon in the Coliseum, just a small little raise in the ticket prices. And then I'm going to try to keep those ticket prices when I go back to Chilhowie the next week. So that, I think, is where this makes sense, is because you utilize that big show in the Coliseum to jump the ticket price a little bit. The fans have paid it once. They're into what you do. You're going to work angles during this big show that you can return to Chilhowie Park. And if you can get them in there for a little bit more money per customer, it's going to certainly affect your bottom line. And it's a pretty decent way to raise your prices and kind of make it not so noticeable to the fans.
Where else are you working during this period of time, Ron, that we're talking about, the end of February, early March 1975? You are obviously working in your territory. Where else are you working?
I'm working, I do 2 weeks. Let's talk about the first 2 weeks in March in 1975. I'm going to defend the title 3 times in Memphis. Once against Phil Hickerson, big boy, pretty darn good worker, a good talent, got a future. He's one of those guys that has a future in the business. And then I'm going to work twice and put up my title against Danny Hodge back to back after Phil Hickerson. It's one of my first matches with Danny, the first one. And that's, that's an experience. Wrestling with Danny is a true experience. Real quick, I'll tell you one story. My dad and I stood on the stage one time when I was a senior in high school in Atlanta, and Danny Hodge was working the ring, match in the ring. And I had not, it was one of the first times I'd ever seen Danny Hodge, period. And I remember standing by my dad and watching him, and he locked up hands with the heel. And when he locked up hands with the heel, Danny just didn't make any movements, didn't change his body or anything. And all of a sudden, the heel dropped down on his knees, and he's just screaming. I can hear him screaming on the stage where we are. And I go, "What's going on?" And Dad says, he said, "He's about to break his hands." And I go, "Wow, what are you kidding? He's just got him by the hands." And he goes, "No, his hands ain't normal hands, Ron, because he's playing with him. He's got him. He's got him begging right now." He said, "Can you hear him?" And "Yeah, I can hear him. Everybody in the building can hear him. He's about to beat him just with his hands being locked." He goes, "Yeah, and he could if he wanted to." So, he's got those tremendous hands, and geez, when you're working against him, you just feel that grip. It's pretty scary, man. So, first time against Danny in Memphis, 1 hour draw. We wrestled for an hour. Pretty darn solid wrestling match, too. And then the second time, he's going to win by disqualification, but he's not going to win the belt. And I also had an unusual Saturday night. Didn't have many Saturday nights in Chattanooga, but I'm going to defend my Southern title for Harry Thornton and Nick Goulas and Roy in Chattanooga against the fabulous one himself, Jackie Fargo. And Fargo's going to win by disqualification, but he's not going to win the championship. And pretty good talent that I'm dealing with. Whenever I go Memphis, Chattanooga, Louisville, I'm working against some pretty good guys.
Ron, as we begin to wrap things up, we want to remind everyone that they can become friends with you on Facebook. The page, Ron Fuller, the Tennessee Stud. All you have to do is like that page and boom, instantly you are friends with the Tennessee Stud. You can also follow the Stud on Instagram and Twitter at Ron Fuller Welch. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last, and you can hear me on the 605 Super Podcast at 605pod.com, or available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts, classic wrestling talk, and wrestling humor, the 605 Super Podcast. Also, we want to remind you, Super Studcast number 16 with Les Thatcher, parts 1 and 2 are now up. That's right, part 2 is available right now at tnstud.com or patreon.com YouTube.com/Studcast. You want to go out of your way to listen to this. This is a lot of fun. And if you like Southeastern, if you become a fan of Southeastern through listening to the Studcast, you definitely want to hear this. But on the topic of the Studcast, Ron, where are we going next week?
Well, we're going to discuss the outcome of the big boxing card, obviously, on May the 7th, in 1975. And we're going to discuss changes coming into talent in the next 30 days at Southeastern. And it's about time for it. We'll talk about why that happens and why it makes sense. And we're going to talk about some things that are happening in some of the nearby territories, Georgia. Crockett's territory, a little bit about what's going on in Nashville with Roy's office. A lot of things happening in this time frame in 1975 with wrestling old school back in the day.
Ron Fuller's Studcast is a production of the Arcadian Vanguard Podcast Network. For the Tennessee Stud Ron Fuller, I'm the great Brian Last. The story continues next week.